Good morning. If you have your Bibles, if you'll turn to Ezekiel 1:1-3. I'm Debbie Berger. My husband and I, Steve, have been members of Heart for the Heights for almost 48 years. I'm a part of the worship team, the nurture team, and I teach 5th grade with Pam Huey. Let's read. Hear the word of the Lord. In the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, while I was among the exiles by the Kibar Canal, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's exile. The word of the Lord came directly to the priest Ezekiel, son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the Kibar Canal. The Lord's hand was on him there. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning. Ready for Labor Day? Some of y'all are retired. You're like, every day is Labor Day. That's what's going on. It was the best day of her life, so the second grader said. Lauren and I have some friends who just recently adopted a little first grade boy, second grade girl, brother and sister, and they, due to their life situation, had not experienced much, not many fun things. And this summer, the family that adopted them, their whole extended family took them to the beach in Florida. Well, they were, I think they may be in Dallas Love or somewhere at the airport on their way to the beach. And as they're waiting in line for the restroom, again, just getting ready for the second leg of the flight, the sister, I guess this would be like the aunt of the newly adopted kids, was standing there waiting by the bathroom with the second grade girl and thinking like, traveling is the worst, and like it's taking forever. And about that time is when the little second grade girl said, "This is the best day of my life." Because she'd never done anything like that. So she was getting to travel and fly on airplanes, and it was amazing. But what was the best day of her life quickly became a faded memory. Because then they got to the beach. Her mind was blown, right? Man, I wish I could have been there to see her little face, right? First time seeing the beach, never been on vacation in her life. I was texting the family, getting some of the, just like, hey, give me some perspective on the story. And they said that she asked if they could do that trip every single year as a family. And she also had already made plans that when she gets older, she's going to move there and she's going to run a snow cone shop because she loves the beach. But what I want you to hear about that, though, in particular, is she thought flying was the best day of her life ever. That's like, she wanted to hold on to that. But then when she got to the beach, she quickly forgot about the airplane, and what took up residence in her heart of love was the beach, right? There's an old famous quote from Thomas Chalmers. He's an old Puritan preacher, and he said, the best, I'm kind of paraphrasing, modernizing it, but the best way to drive something from the human heart is to replace it with something more beautiful. It's a good word. And that's true. It's hard to tell your affections where to go, and when your heart latches onto something and you find your identity in something, it's hard to get rid of that. Thomas Chalmers is right. The way you do that is you replace it with something more beautiful, more lovely. The text that Miss Debbie read a minute ago, just for some context, Ezekiel and the Israelites, they're in exile. Yes, as we're going through this series through the Bible, we've started in Genesis, and now we're in Ezekiel. If you don't know if you're a guest, we're reading through the Bible chronologically as a church. And as we read, our sermon series is kind of following along with that. And so we've been in exile for a while. And if you remember, they're in exile because of their own sin. They rebelled against God over and over and over again. And so now they're in Babylon. And they're reaping the consequences of what they've done. Part of it is they've committed idolatry. They've latched onto these false gods. They've forgotten who God is and therefore forgotten who they are. Really, you can say that the thesis of Ezekiel, as you read it, what you're going to see over and over and over again is God tells Ezekiel, I'm going to do, fill in the blank, I'm going to do this, and they will know, he says, that I am the Lord. He wants his people to realize, I'm the Lord, not these little fake mamby-pamby gods that they're worshiping. No, there's one true God. And it's not just because he has like this complex of, no, like he knows what is best for his people is him and him alone, right? What we need is God. So he's, in the book of Ezekiel, shows Ezekiel's all these different visions. And I would contend one of the driving forces or reasons behind that is he's replacing what's in their heart with something more beautiful. They've attached themselves to these false gods, these false ideologies, to sin, and he's going to help them replace it with something more beautiful, a grand vision of who God is. So what I want to do is we're just going to read the rest of chapter 1. When I say just read, I don't mean I'm going to quit preaching after that. But like, we're going to read all of chapter 1. And I just want to let you and let me just let the text speak for itself as Ezekiel kind of paints this grand vision of God that God gave to him. He says, I looked, I'm in verse 4 of chapter 1. I looked, and there was a whirlwind coming from the north, a huge cloud with fire flashing back and forth and brilliant light all around it. In the center of the fire, there was a gleam like amber. The likeness of 4 living creatures came from it, and this was their appearance. They looked something like a human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the hooves of a calf, sparkling like the gleam of polished bronze. They had human hands under their wings on their 4 sides. All 4 of them had faces and wings. Their wings were touching. The creatures did not turn as they moved. Each one went straight ahead. Their faces, by the way, verse 10, he's just kind of circling back and unpacking more of what these creatures look like, giving us more detail. He says, their faces looked something like the face of a human, and each of the 4 had the face of a lion on the right, the face of an ox on the left, and the face of an eagle. That is what their faces were like. Their wings were spread upward. Each had 2 wings touching that of another, and 2 wings covering its body. Each creature went straight ahead. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went without turning as they moved. The likeness of the living creatures was like the appearance of blazing coals of fire or like torches. Fire was moving back and forth between the living creatures. It was bright with lightning coming out of it. The creatures were darting back and forth like flashes of lightning. When I looked at the living creatures, there was one wheel on the ground beside each of the 4-faced creatures. The appearance of the wheels and their craftsmanship was like the gleam of beryl, which is a gemstone. And all 4 had the same likeness. Their appearance and craftsmanship was like a wheel within a wheel. When they moved, they went in any of the 4 directions without turning as they moved. Their 4 rims were tall and awe-inspiring, completely covered with eyes. When the living creatures moved, the wheels moved beside them. And when the creatures rose from the earth, the wheels also rose. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, the creatures went in the direction the Spirit was moving. The wheels rose alongside them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved. When the creatures stopped, the wheels stopped. And when the creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose alongside them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Over the heads of the living creatures, the likeness of an expanse was spread out. It gleamed like awe-inspiring crystal, and under the expanse, their wings extended one toward another. They each also had 2 wings covering their bodies. When they moved, I heard the sound of their wings like the roar of a huge torrent, like the voice of the Almighty, and a sound of tumult like the noise of an army. When they stopped, they lowered their wings. A voice came from above the expanse over their heads. When they stopped, they lowered their wings. Something like a throne with the appearance of lapis lazuli was above the expanse over their heads. On the throne, high above, was someone who looked like a human. From what seemed to be his waist up, I saw a gleam like amber with what looked like fire enclosing it all around. From what seemed to be his waist down, I also saw what looked like fire. There was a brilliant light all around him. The appearance of the brilliant light all around was like that of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. This was the appearance of the likeness of the Lord's glory. And when I saw it, I fell face down and heard a voice speaking. Maybe you read all that, hear all that, and you respond like my 6-year-old daughter does sometimes and say, "What?" Like, what in the world did we just read? I would say if that's your response, a little bit of like, what in the world? Then I think you kind of get it. Like, no, seriously, think about it. He's talking about the majesty, the glory of God seated on the throne. You're not supposed to go, yeah, I totally get that. It's just not a big deal. Yeah, I just study that in my quiet time every day. It's just kind of what I do. Like, no, you should. What? This is amazing. God seated on the throne in all of his glory and majesty. As one man said, if you don't understand it, you might understand it. We're not supposed to be able to fully grasp how majestic, how powerful, how incredible God Almighty is. If you can fit God in a box, you don't have God in a box. No, he's beyond us. We can't fully fathom and understand who he is. You know, and there's a joy in the unknown. There's a beauty, a glorious beauty in the gap. Meaning the first time you stand and look at the ocean, your jaw should drop a little bit. Like, wow. The first time you experience the Smoky Mountains, you shouldn't if someone's there with you, like, well, let me fully explain to you about these mountains. You're like, shh. Let me just take it in for a second. Don't give me all the details. Let me just see it. There's a joy in the unknown. There's a beauty in the gap almost of like, hey, I don't fully understand this yet. And that's where we should be as we read Ezekiel. You know, actually, I would say that's how he is he's trying to explain the vision God gave him. I kind of tried to emphasize a little bit as I read, but I don't want to be distracting. But the word like or likeness is used 23 times in this passage. 23 times Ezekiel goes, he's looking at what God's showing him, and it's kind of like, or if I had to describe it, it's the likeness of a rainbow. He can't quite find the words to use to describe the majesty and the glory of God. So he says it's kind of like this. So even as he's seeing it, can't fully put it into words. So as we read this passage, that's how we should be, is like, hey, I'm getting this picture. I don't fully understand it, and that's okay because we're talking about the majesty and the glory of God. In chapter 3, verse 15, it says that after this vision, because this is just the first part of the vision, after this vision that God gives Ezekiel, it says, he sat stunned for 3 days. Or sorry, for 7 days. 7 days. I got that wrong there. 7 days he sat stunned. I'm going to start, next time y'all accuse me of looking bored, I'm going to say I'm just stunned by the glory of the Lord. That's how amazing this was. That's how majestic it was that he just had to sit stunned for 7 days. There is no one bigger or better than our God. But we should be in awe of his majesty, his glory. It would be enough to close this and just say, God, you're majestic, you're beyond me. I worship you not just for what you do, but also because of just simply who you are. But I want to humbly and carefully, as we look at this grand picture, this painting that Ezekiel's given us from God, I want to just, if I could, if you would let me, point out 3 simple things about the painting that we see in this passage, this vision of who God is. Just 3 simple things. Here's the first one. Let me say this, leave you on the anticipation there. I will say this, remember, he's on the throne. As it ends there in chapter 1, he says, I see the glory of the likeness of God. The idea is that he's getting a glimpse, just a little glimpse of God on the throne. So he's talking about God's reign, his lordship, that he is the ultimate authority that exists. Not just here in Tennessee, not just in the States, not just in our world, period. He is the Lord, the King of the universe. Y'all with me? That's this kind of broadly this painting. 3 things about the painting. 1, your King is ever present. Number 1, your King is ever present. Clearly, as you read those last verses 25 through 28, he's talking about God on the throne, his kingship, his lordship, and the vision gives us a little understanding, a little perspective on that lordship. And one of them is that he's ever present. Let me show you a few places where I'm seeing that. Do you remember when Miss Debbie read in verse 3 of chapter 1, where are they when this vision takes place? Where's Ezekiel when this vision takes place? Is he at the temple hanging out in Jerusalem? No, where's he at? It's not cheating to look at the Bible. What's it say in verse 3? He's in, the land of the Chaldeans. He's in Babylon, right? Yeah. He's far away from the temple of God. And yet, right there, God shows up and meets Ezekiel. This would have been kind of a new concept to some of the Israelites because they had this idea that God was only and solely right at the temple in Jerusalem. God's showing them, no, I can be with you anywhere you are. In the middle of a pagan city where you've been exiled because of your sin, I can show up and meet you right there. He was in Babylon. Look over at verse 15. It says, when I looked at the living creatures, there was one wheel on the ground. So again, the wheels on the throne of the Lord. One indicating the wheels, he can go anywhere he wants. He can be present anywhere he wants. But it says, one wheel was on the ground. Man, what a cool picture. That the throne of God, the wheel of the throne of God, touching the earth. God's not just up in heaven like, well, I'm in charge, I'm the king, hope you guys figure it out. No, he comes right to where we are at and engages and meets with us. Wheels on the ground. He's present. And then it says in verse 18, it says, speaking of these wheels, it says their 4 rims were tall and awe-inspiring, completely covered with eyes. Scholars will tell you that the idea there is that he sees everything. There's nowhere that you can be that you are out of the sight of God. God, your King, is ever present. Now I recognize that because of, I'm going to preach to you like I would need to hear this, okay? Is that fair? Again, this passage is a little different, right? I track with stories. So I'm going to reference another biblical story. You don't have to turn there. But in the biblical story to help give a little context to this idea, or to flesh out this idea of God being present. There's a story in 1 Kings chapter 20 where the king of Syria is talking smack to the king of the Israelites, and the Israelite king says, hey, you shouldn't talk like someone who's taking their armor off before you even put your armor on. In other words, he's saying, you're talking a big game, we hadn't even fought yet, right? So they have this battle. This is the Brandon Hayes translation, if you can't tell, okay? They have the battle, and Israel brings the smackdown. God works, and it's amazing. He shows up, he defeats the enemy. And after Syria is defeated, the king of Aram, Syria, he says, you know what? Well, it's just because their gods, he says, plural gods, little g, their gods are the gods of the hills. If we take them on in the valley, oh, it's so over. We're going to win. It's kind of like, we lost it. You come to our home court, we'll take care of business, right? Like, that's kind of the idea here. So sure enough, a few verses later in 1 Kings 20, God says, you know what? Because they think I'm only the God of the hills, you're going to win again. So they have a battle in the valley, and guess who wins? Come on, help me out. The Israelites won. Because God is not limited to one place at one time. He's not just the God of the hills. He's not just the God of the valleys. He's God, period. Your king is ever present. Listen to me. There's no situation, be it financial, be it marital, be it friendship, be it job. There's no season that you will find yourself in that God is not there with you. In all of his glory, in all of his majesty, he is present. He's present. Well, man, I don't really deserve it because I'm a mess. Neither did the Israelites. They were in Babylon because of their sin, and yet God showed up to be there and be present with them. He's present. Your king is ever present. Number 2, your king is ever purposeful. So we're just looking at this big picture, this painting, this beautiful vision of God. Second thing, just observation I want to make about it is your king is ever purposeful. Look at verse 12. It says, each creature went straight ahead. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went without turning as they moved. Then verse 20. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, the creatures went in the direction the Spirit was moving. So a couple things we see there. The Spirit of God is giving direction, giving movement, telling the creatures where to go, the throne where to move. But it also says each creature went straight ahead without turning. So again, hang with me here. 4 faces on these creatures, right? We'll unpack them more in a minute, but 4 faces on these creatures. Whichever way they move, it's moving forward because there's a face there. Tracking with me a little bit? God gives direction. It's always moving forward. Here's how I'd say it simply. God's reign, R-E-I-G-N, God's reign is not random. He is purposeful with what he does. He uses his authority, his kingship, with intentionality and purpose. I love that it says they moved forward straight ahead without turning as they moved. So God never is like, oh man, I didn't see that coming. Now I got to change course. God never is like, oh man, didn't see that wreck up there. I'm going to have to detour. No, God always knows what he's doing and always moves with purpose straight ahead. Lauren and I met back in May of 2007. And we got to hang out for, I guess, about 3 or 4 days. And then I moved to Charleston, South Carolina to work at Infuge. Anybody do Fuge? By Fuge? Yeah, don't be shy about it. Okay, yeah. Got a few hands going up. Fuge, it's just a Christian camp that Lifeway used to run. Maybe they still do. I don't know. Yes, they still do. Okay, sorry. I'm out of the student ministry game. Anyways, worked at Infuge. And so I was in Charleston, at Charleston Southern. And Lauren, I guess midsummer, came to visit. And I wanted to impress her. We just started dating. I'm like, I'm going to take her downtown Charleston and show her around. So we get in the car, and we start driving towards downtown. And as we're driving, I realize I don't know where the exit is. So somehow or another, I even looked the other day, there's not really like a loop around Charleston, I don't think, but somehow we start making these loops. And you remember this, Lauren? About the second or third time around Charleston, Lauren's like, hey, do you need some help? Right? I'm trying to play it all cool. I'm like, nah, we just sightseeing, girl. We just cruising, you know, like, I had no clue what I was doing. She had to say, you're driving in circles. Like, and so sure enough, she humbled me and we figured it out, right? That's before iPhones, okay? I think sometimes it's like okay, God, I know God's got the steering wheel. Jesus, take the wheel. Carrie said it, right? Like, I'm sitting over here and we begin to wonder, like, does God know what he's doing? Did he miss that exit? I was supposed to get off there. God always knows what he's doing. He doesn't need a GPS. He's on the throne. He's always moving with purpose and intentionality. He hasn't forgotten you. It may feel like he's driving in circles to you. He's still moving forward. He's waiting for you to catch up. He's ever present. He's ever purposeful. Even in their exile, they were there so God could draw them back to himself. It wasn't like, done with you, forget you. No, he was sending them to exile so they would come back to him to move forward as his redeemed people, right? He's always purposeful. He's ever present. He's ever purposeful. Listen, if God is just ever present and ever purposeful and it stopped there, we might be in a bind. But listen to this third thing. He's ever present. He's ever purposeful. Number 3, your king is ever powerful. If he didn't have the power to do anything, then it wouldn't really matter if he was with us and he has purpose if he didn't have any power, right? No, he's present, he's purposeful, and he's got the power to do what he needs to do and what you need him to do. Where am I getting this? Look in the text at back at verse 10, we looked at a minute ago. He says, their faces, talking about these 4 creatures, their faces looked something like the face of a human, and each of the 4 had the face of a lion on the right, the face of an ox on the left, and the face of an eagle. This is telling us a little bit about the majesty and power of God. So humanity being the highest of God's creation, but also the lion. You could think of that as the highest of the creation in the wild order. It's like the lion's the king of the jungle, right? The ox being the highest, most majestic of the domestic order, the tame order, you could say. And then the eagle, the highest of the air, the most majestic of the air. God created all of them, all these powerful animals that we think of. It's just a reflection that God is he's the almighty creator, powerful God. Majestic in glory. Then down at verse 14, it says, the creatures were darting back and forth like flashes of lightning. So as they're going and doing God's work and being about God's business, they're going, it's like flashes of lightning. It's instantaneous. God is so powerful that when he says go, when he wants his will done, it's instantaneous, right? When you have limited power, you have to overcome hurdles and you think through like, hey, how are we gonna north wind this problem, right? How are we gonna figure this out so that we can get the team on board? When you're all powerful, you just do it automatically. That's how God's work is. That's how God is. It's instantaneous. Then in verse 18, it says, their 4 rims were tall and awe-inspiring. So remember, these are the rims, the wheels that are under the throne of God, this picture of movement. The rims are tall and awe-inspiring. So as you look at these wheels, you step back, they're massive. I remember the first time, well, I'll put it this way without going another story. If we want to go off-roading somewhere in Tennessee and go do a little mudding or something or go do a little rock crawling, you kind of need some decent-sized tires, right? Like, I don't mean this as a dig, but like, I'll pick on my wife. It's always dangerous. Lauren has a Toyota 4Runner. It's a really nice 4Runner. It's technically an off-road vehicle, but if we wanted to really go off-roading, her tires are not big enough. She will be limited because they're small tires. Simple illustration, see it in the text. He says these tires, these wheels, these rims are huge. The picture there, the image there is God can go anywhere, do anything. He's not limited by, I have all this purpose and I'm present, but I have itty bitty tires, I can't go anywhere. No, he can go anywhere. Look at verse 24. It says, when they moved, speaking of these creatures, I heard the sound of their wings like the roar of a huge torrent, like the voice of the Almighty, and a sound of tumult like the noise of an army. Just these four creatures, when their wings are moving, it sounds like an army on the move. Again, Ezekiel, as God is showing in this vision, Ezekiel communicating to us, God is ever powerful. He is strong. He is not weak. He is able to do whatever he wants. So he's present, he's purposeful, and he's got the power to do what he needs to do. Again, share a story from the Bible that maybe helps this have a little more meat to it, a little more understanding to it, I should say. There's a story in Mark chapter 4 where Jesus and the disciples are out on a boat in the Sea of Galilee. Jesus had a full day of ministry with the disciples, and they go out in the boat, and it's nice and calm on the Sea of Galilee. They're hanging out, and Jesus, what did Jesus go do? Do you remember? He went to sleep. Isn't that a funny thing to think about, Jesus being asleep? Do you think he snored? I don't know. Jesus was asleep on the boat. And then a massive windstorm rose up. Do you know that even today, the way the wind funnels down through the hills around the Sea of Galilee, even today, the waves can get up to 8 feet high on the Sea of Galilee. Can you imagine being there? I've seen the boat, or a boat that was probably like what Jesus was on. They call it the Jesus boat. You can go visit in Israel. It's pretty cool. Have a little replica in my office if you want to see it after church. Can you imagine being on this little boat out on the Sea of Galilee in the middle of the night? Again, you don't have your cell phone to warn you, storm coming, you're just out there, you have no idea. The waves begin to rise. Can't you just see the boys back and forth, getting buckets, trying to toss the water out because we're going to drown on the Sea of Galilee. And they're like, where is Jesus? He's sleeping. So can you, Master, get up. Do you remember what they asked him? Don't you even care? Hey, just time out for a second. What a funny thing to ask the Savior of the world. Don't you even care about us? They're losing their minds. Jesus gets up. And do you remember what he said to the wind and the waves? What he said? There's different translations, but essentially, hush, shh. Y'all don't tell anybody, I got 6-year-olds, and I don't work on them, okay? Shh, they keep going. Jesus says, shh, to the wind and the waves, hush, be still. And the craziest thing happened. The wind and the waves actually listened to him. How cool would it have been to be there? Jesus standing on the front of that boat, water from the rain dripping down his beard. He's just, hush, be still. And it just completely calms. And then just a little water lapping against the boat. And it says a new question entered the disciples' hearts. Like, what happened? Oh, we're scared, so scared of the storm, and they're scared of where's Jesus? And then says, then they had a new fear of, who is this that even the winds and the waves obey him? Do you remember right before that what Jesus asked them, though? He said, you have little faith. Why are we so scared? Do you forget who I am? See, when you have a small view of God, your problems seem super big. You can say it this way. When you minimize his majesty, you maximize your mess. when you're just like, oh, Jesus is my buddy, he's my friend. Then when you hit storms, no wonder you're scared. But when you realize, yes, Jesus is my friend because he loved me enough to die for me on the cross. But he's not just any friend. He is the King of the universe who is ever present. He's always purposeful. He is all powerful. That's who my King is. Then when you face the problems in life, it doesn't mean they're easy, but they have right perspective in your life because you're like, that does seem pretty big, but God is way bigger. You can choose. Am I going to minimize his majesty and maximize my mess? Or am I going to rightly see his majesty and then right size the mess that I am and the problems I find myself in? See, you can, to go back to Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 15, you can either be stunned by your problems or you can be stunned by the Lord Jesus Christ. Stunned by, oh, how am I going to do this? I'm overwhelmed. Or stunned by, God, you are magnificent and all powerful and purposeful and present. And yes, this is a hard situation, but God, you're totally big enough to handle this. Friend, no marriage, no friendship, no struggle you face, no sin addiction, nothing you face is too far gone for the power and majesty of Jesus Christ. So fix your eyes on him. That's the call to respond this morning. We believe that God's word demands a response. That's a good thing. Like, it's so good, it demands. We got to respond to it. And the response this morning is, as a believer, God, help me see you for all that you are in your glory and your majesty. To have the right perspective of who you are and not a small perspective. And God, therefore, because I see how good and glorious you are, God, to then right size the problems in my life and the pain in my life and the sin in my life, God, help me to see who you are. That you are able to do far more than we could ask or imagine because you are the King of the universe. If you're a believer, would you just make that your prayer this morning? God, open my eyes. This is what Paul prays in Ephesians. God, open my eyes to who you are. God, yes, you are indescribable. I can't even find the right words for it, but God, help me to see you for who you are. And here's the cool thing. If you don't know Jesus Christ, you've not experienced his saving grace, this King we just read about, the God who's ever present, ever purposeful, ever powerful, who sits on the throne, this King loves you enough that he came and died a sinner's death on a cross for you so you could know him. So the King of the universe, you can call him friend if you know Jesus. See, the majesty of God just maximizes the beauty of the cross. That Jesus wasn't just some peasant in old-time Israel. No, he's the King of the universe who died for you. That is indescribable. How do you respond to that? It's simply just, here's my life, Lord. I believe in you. I surrender to you. I want to know you. So if you're a believer, the call to respond this morning again is just say, God, open my eyes. Help me to see you for who you are, and that the pain and the problems in my life would be right-sized based on who you are. If you don't know Jesus, the call to respond is just, Jesus, would you save me this morning? I want to know you. I'm going to give you time right now to pray and talk to the Lord. We're going to sing a song in a second. We're not quite done yet, but I want you right now just to pray and talk to the Lord. Ask him to open your eyes to who he is right now.